between these players. I mean, a lot of sort of preparation does go into these tournaments, and everything kind of has reasoning as to why people play it. And, you can see here, there's just so much synergy in these decks, like the trade, for example, for the energy acceleration. And overall, it's just a fantastic deck.
Wow, I am super excited because we are seeing a great clash of Americans in this round. We see Xander Perro, and I hope he's playing the deck that I saw him testing in the hotel yesterday. He was actually testing a Gorgeist deck yesterday, so if this is the case, we're going to have some fireworks. And he's up against Daniel Altavilla. So Daniel is going to be playing a Decidueye Zoroark variant. This is a really great way to play Zoroark, which is very, very cool. It looks like, unfortunately, Xander hasn't ended up going for the Gorgeist build.
No.
He's going a little bit safer. He's going with Drampa Garbodor. So
he is going with Drampa Garbodor, and I mean, Drampa Garbodor, again, we've spoken about it so much over the course of this, just today alone, let alone how much we'll see it over the course of this weekend, but just a very safe and consistent play. And of course, he does run just I'm just having a look. He does run just the one Espeon EX, which it does really well against sort of stage 2 decks. I can see that Daniel is running Decidueye. That's not something that we've seen a lot of so far yet in the tournament.
Yeah, it's sort of a comeback for Decidueye GX. Combining it with the new Shining Legend Zoroark GX gives you a great draw engine to fall back on. Using that trade, as we saw in the last game, how Grafton was utilising it, even in the Sil Valley deck, people are finding ways to play this card just because it gives you so much hand advantage. And in any trading card game known to man, gaining card advantage is always the best thing you can do, and at the same time you get to discard extra junk that you don't want throughout the game. So seeing these two players play is going to be excellent here. It's going to be a really interesting clash. You can see Daniel, he's going as quickly as possible.
Wow.
No surprise there. That's because he's got himself the turn 1 Tapu Lele. You can see him scouting out basic Pokemon straight away. That's a telltale sign that he can go for a Bridget. He has prized one of them. He does play 2 though. Okay. So he should be fine.
He's safe. So, but yeah, I mean, let's not forget that. Decidueye is generally a slower deck. We like to refer to it as a slower deck because it takes a little while to build up. It doesn't have Forest of Giant Plants like it used to have, which made it so much quicker. So, I mean, time could be a factor. He's obviously very aware of that. Obviously, very experienced with the deck that he's managed to go through that quickly and identify what's prized, what he needs, and he's playing very, very quickly. So, wow.
Yeah, he's sort of known for playing quite quickly. He is, of course, the Zoroark master. He was the one who came up with, or at least made popular, the Zoroark Drampa variant. Today, he's playing the new Zoroark in combination with a new Pokemon in Decidueye GX. So, pretty interesting. He's happy to hold everything else. His hand looks insane for next turn. He has Evo Soda, Rare Candy.
Wow.
He has Floatstone as well, so he could be having some fireworks next turn. Xander, he's got a pretty painful Ultra Ball in his first action. He's gone for
double
Colours Energy straight into the bin. It looks like an N as well. So Xander, he's going to be going for the Tapu Lele, almost mirroring Daniel by having a Bridget. It looks like that's what he's eyeing up. Yeah. But having to spend a double Colours Energy in the process sounds pretty painful to me.
Right, it's not something you want to do, especially with these these big Drampa Garbodor decks. You don't really want to be burning those double Colours Energies just because you do need them for Drampa. There's no real form of energy acceleration within the deck, unless does he play? I believe he plays the an Espeon GX. So I mean that could be a viable attacker sort of turn 1. But yeah, it's. The other factor is obviously that you do have Decidueye, which obviously with Feather Arrow might start KOing a lot of these small basic Pokemon, which is something that you might want to consider.
This is very interesting from Xander. He's happy with 2 of his cards, and he's just thinking, do I want to grab myself an Eevee right now, or do I want to grab myself a Trubbish? Looks like he's happier with the Trubbish, and that seems reasonable, seeing as though he can't move into the active with an Espeon anyway, because he just has 1 energy remaining in his hand. One of the things he decided to keep hold of, he thought was more precious than the double Colours Energy that he'll be discarding this turn, is Potown.
Right.
And Potown really important for keeping Pokemon in 1-hit KO range. You're going to see, we see the Psychic Energy attachment to the Drampa, and the rest of his hand is just a double Colours and an N, so that's why it makes sense. The reason why he needed the Potown so badly, because for Daniel, getting from 210 HP down to 180 on the Zoroark GX is so important for the Drampa, but we can see how Daniel is able to get around this, and that's by Evo Soda. It comes directly from the deck, so it avoids the Potown, and that's huge for Daniel.
Absolutely, but on Xander's side, he's actually prioritizing those Trubbish because he knows that if he hits that Garbotoxin Garbodor and attaches a tool to it, he's going to shut off all those abilities. So let's not forget the Trade is an ability, Feather Arrow is an ability, Wonder Tag is an ability, and he can really shut this deck down. I'm assuming Daniel must be playing a high count or field blower because he knows that is a potential threat. Going for an N, but I mean, does he play any stadium cards at the moment? Because if he doesn't, I mean, obviously he does have the field blow, he can knock it off, knock the Potown off, but he doesn't want to be accumulating damage with that Potown sitting there in the stadium zone.
Yeah, so we saw he's used his trade already, nothing useful off there. He was hoping to maybe hit the combination of rare candy plus a Pokemon, but he just drew into more rare candies, so he had to go for the end there. And as you said, he's going to have to figure out his sequencing. How much can he evolve without being too punished? He's drawn into a rare candy and a Decidueye, so that's a great start for him. I think he's content to allow that to be the case because 210 HP should be out of range of the Drampers for now at least. He's going to keep an eye on his item count. He's doing everything at a furious pace, keeping us moving. So there's lots of things he needs to measure in this matchup. He needs to be aware of his own item count because, of course, Xander is carrying the Trashalanche Garbodor as a very dangerous attacker, but we are going to see him opting to evolve the active Decidueye. It does have the Float Stone on, so that makes a lot of sense. He's also going to attach a Grass Energy. Looks like he missed out on double Colorless, so he can't go for a Riotous Beating this turn. He could go for an early Hollow Hunt GX, which is interesting. Oftentimes you want to keep it for Field Blowers, but it looks like he's thinking this is a good enough time as any to cash in and gain back Rare Candy, Evo Soda, and that N once again.
Right, and again, as you say, that Evo Soda is going to get through the Potown. He won't obviously put damage on there because it's a very smart play using his GX attack very early on. And unlike Twilight GX, which is Gardevoir GX's GX attack, this goes directly to the hand, so he knows he's going to have that for next turn, unless, of course, Xander uses something like an N. But I mean, it's an interesting play putting the Feather Arrow on the Dramper and not going for the Trubbish because, you know, when the deck is locked out of abilities, there's not really too much you can do with it other than obviously just try and attack with Zoroark or with Decidueye. But as you can see, Xander is going with the Energy Evolution ability, which is Eevee's ability, and that's why he has the Espeon GX out. Of course, that comes straight from the deck as well, so it avoids Potow. So a lot of searching from the deck going on at this moment in time. But interestingly, I'm surprised Xander isn't going. He's got the Trashalanche Garbodor in hand, but I'm just thinking, surprisingly...
Okay, so he's got himself activation of the Potown, so he can use the Dramper now for its full effect with the Berserk, but that's going to mean a future turn because he's already attached a Psychic. Looks like he's going to go for maybe a stalling play, maybe bringing up the Zoroark and getting it confused. That's exactly what he's going to go for. He notices that that's probably Daniel's main attacker, so getting the 30 this way, or now 60 with a Choice Band. Actually, there's resistance, so it will go to 40.
Yeah.
But it's most important that we get the confusion on, so it's difficult for the Zoroark to actually get an attack in. So really good play from Xander. He's taking it slower, but making sure he can have attackers throughout the game. Once again, we're going to see an Evo Soda, and the counter comes back on from Daniel. It's great that the judge is being crucial on this so that we can see how many items are being played. This is really helpful to us. Daniel... Good thing for him, there's no ability lock this turn, so he can still gain access to a couple of trades and maybe get his board state built up a little bit more and maybe throw down some more Feather Arrows depending on how many Decidueye he can get set up this turn.
Yeah, and let's not forget that when he did use his GX attack, those item cards went back to the hand. That means obviously Trashalanche is doing less damage, but he's replayed the Evo Soda, so that is one more.
Ooh, wow.
Ooh, wow.
He traded into double Evo Soda. He's holding onto a Rare Candy, so you can see instead he's going to say, why do I need Evo Soda when I can Rare Candy this turn?
Right,
and he drew into an Ultra Ball, so he can Ultra Ball away one of those Evo Sodas and another card. Then he can use the second Evo Soda, so he'll get one Decidueye, one Dartrix, and his board is getting crazy. And this is exactly why it's a match made in heaven between these two cards, the Zoroark as well as the Decidueye.
Right.
And he's not even used to support it yet. He's drawn into a Guzma, so he can maybe get around the confusion in this regard as well. Maybe Guzmaing up the Dramper, starting to get damage on it if he would wish. Maybe even the Trashalanche Garbodor was a big enough threat. So he can get around confusion also because he has a double Colorless Energy this turn.
Absolutely. And if he does use the Guzma and he goes with the Zoroark on the bench and he is able to use Riotous Beatings, he could, he's going for the Dramper, interestingly.
Yep.
But what he could have done is actually targeted the Drubbish, which means that he knows his abilities would be safe.
Yeah.
So that would have been a potential play. But it looks like he's going for a pretty quick game, as it looks. Wow.
Yeah. He's just going to go for the double Evo Soda, grabbing himself double Dartrix and setting his stall out.
Not even just in the way that he's playing is so quick. He's just targeting straight out those EXs and GXs, trying to get them, trying to knock them out as quickly as possible to kind of finish the game rather than, sort of taking a bit more slowly, which is certainly an interesting style. But next turn, he's got two, Decidueyes, he can get three. I mean, this is crazy. 3 Decidueyes and 2 Zoroarks is is immense.
Yeah, so
really.
Alongside the Feather Arrow, that puts the Drampa in range of a Riotous Beating. It does 20 times the amount of all of your Pokemon in play, with the Choice Band on top and that extra Feather Arrow we saw from Daniel. That's just enough to deal with the Drampa GX. So Xander really on the back foot. One of the best things about this Zoroark is that it does have Psychic Resistance, allowing Daniel to play a few more items than he otherwise could do, and also having the resistance on the Espeon is going to make sure that he can tank hits for the next few turns. And Daniel also plays Max Potion in his list, so trying to remove some of this damage is going to be a big thing here. So really off to a flying start, and his board state is incredible. He's not even used a Field Blower yet, so even when Garbodor's going to come down, he's going to have means of getting rid of the tools in order to turn off Trashalanche, and that's got to be something Xander's going for this turn. He does have himself an Ultra Ball. I'm not sure if he has a tool in his hand. This could be another turn without Ability Lock here. Oh wow, I think he does have a Float Stone. Okay,
right, so
we're going to see a Trashalanche, a Garbotoxin Garbodor more than likely coming into play here.
I mean, he has to go for that at this moment in time. I mean, there's just too much going on Daniel's side with these Decidueyes, and I mean, every turn he's just trading more and more cards, getting more resources, getting more and more set up. I mean, he has to, especially with the Flowstone in hand, he has to kind of go for that, which is a really smart play. But Daniel in his deck, I'm just trying to look at his prizes. I think he has one Field Blower in his prize cards, so therefore he's only got 2 left in the deck. But I mean, he hasn't played any of them so far, so. I mean, Daniel's. I'm actually liking Daniel's situation quite a lot at the moment, because it doesn't stop him from attacking. He can still attack the next turn. He still, as you say, does have the resistance.
Xander's got an interesting choice. Does he want to go for a Confusion to maybe slow down Daniel, but then once again a Guzma could be awkward, or simply finding another energy? So I guess he is more likely just going to go for a Psychic this turn to get as much damage on as possible. He's going to look through Daniel's discard pile. Again, this is a new archetype. This may be the first time Xander is playing up against a Decidueye Zoroark variant, because he doesn't know what to expect. Are there going to be Acerolas in the list? Are there going to be Max Potions? What do I have to play around? Because this is a brand new archetype, and we can see the Pilot ain't too shabby either. He's done really well.
He's going for the GX attack. He's going for, so he's going to try and spread as much damage as he can. And I think one thing from Xander's side from this game, is he's trying to get as much information as possible at this moment in time, trying to sort of scout out what cards he plays in the deck. So things like the Evosotism, for example. And then next game, subject to obviously how it goes, he can obviously try and counter that a bit more effectively. Maybe you might want to prioritize, for example, the Garbodor more so for next game. But Daniel does go for an N, shuffling both hands in. He's going for 4 cards to Xander's 6.
Yeah, I think this is a really good Divide GX from Xander. You can see he's setting up the Espeon. So now both of the Zoroarks have 60 damage on them.
Right.
He's put 20 on the Tapu Lele as well, so that's not a double Colorless Energy option, because then the Espeon could come in with Psychic. So really cute maths from him. Daniel's able to pick up both Decidueyes, but no Field Blower, so he can't cash in on any of those Feather Arrows, so he's going to have to be content with the 150 damage Riotous Beating. Yeah. It looks like Xander has himself an Ultra Ball, so he could be going for a Devolve play this turn.
Wow, yeah, and I mean, if he got that Field Blow, I think he would have had knockout on the Espeon GX in the active, which would have been really crucial, I think. I'm not too sure how many cards. I think it's 4. Is it 4 item cards that... I think that's what that dice is representing, is the 4 item cards in the discard pile. So Trashalanche isn't really doing too much at the moment. Maybe to play the 7th prize kind of game, maybe go down that route, but...
I think it's time for Espeon. I think it's time...
I think so.
Because also, the only other Pokemon on Daniel's side of the field... with energy is actually the Decidueye, and that was one that was rare candied.
Right.
So by picking that up, Daniel with a low hand size, he may not be able to get back into a new attacker, and he's been end to a low hand size. As long as his ability lock, he can't gain access of trade. These Zoroarks are going to be stuck in his hand, so Xander's not out of this game at all. He's got a huge comeback thanks to that very smart GX attack from the last turn. You can see he's going to get that attachment in. He could just use the payment of retreat, very simple stuff, and he... is just going to go for that Miraculous Shine in order to take 2 prize cards, 1 on each of his single prize Zoruas that he's set up, and also picks up more of these evolution Pokemon. Again, he could cash in from the Potown all over again for even more spread damage. So an incredible swing turn here.
Oh, yes, amazing, isn't it? And as you say, he's got a Rowlet there. I mean, he needed a rare candy. Well, he got a...
Oh, wow, it's a big draw.
What did he... Oh, rare
He's
candy.
got a rare candy in his hand, and he has a Professor Sycamore as well, so... this may not even slow down Daniel.
In the end, he's just...
Potown coming into play is a big thing here,
yes.
but Daniel able to almost play down every card that was just picked up. He's also able to bench a Ralts, and he's going to discard both of those Zoroark GX, and he's picked up a double Colorless Energy, so he can keep attacking this turn. He's not slowed down his pace of play at all, unfazed by any of this.
What is slightly kind of concerning is if that Espeon EX stays on the field, that can just, again, use Miraculous Shine the next turn, and I believe that would knock out the active Decidueye because, would be Rowlet, because you are de-evolving it. But if he can somehow get a bit more damage onto those, I think at least just 20 more damage to both those Decidueyes on the bench, which would be enough to knock out Dartrix. I mean, it's certainly a swing of events. You know, I felt that Daniel was in such a commanding position, and just that one Espeon EX just put in so much work in the stage of the game.
Garbodor plus N is still one of the best combinations in the card game, and you're seeing exactly why that is the case. Looks like Daniel didn't get a Field Blower, so he's trying to protect his Decidueye. You see he benches a Tapu Lele, even though he can't use the ability, just because this is the only thing that can currently take a hit on his board from an Espeon GX, other than some of these Decidueyes, but they may just end up being devolved again, because Xander would be able to take one more prize. As you can see, there's one Decidueye was Rare Candied, and again, the Potown could be coming into effect next turn, and
absolutely
just re-establishes this ability lock is so strong, and we're just going to see it. It's going to be a stalling Guzma from Xander, and he's once again going to opt to use the Miraculous Shine. One more prize for him at the end of this turn, and once again Daniel's going to let that Potown rack up. It's been great play from Xander here.
Absolutely. It's just put in so much work. The Espeon EX, it's just amazing how powerful this card is, and it's so splashable as well. I mean, this is a Psychic Pokemon in a Psychic deck, but I mean, you can play Espeon EX in so many different decks, just because it only requires that one colorless, one energy of the colorless energy. But I mean, it's at this point from Daniel. I mean, what do you kind of do? I mean, you can put down your Decidueyes, but you don't. You've got Garbotoxins in place. That's not going to help you.
You can see him doing some deck counts. Field Blow is the big thing here. Does he want to evolve pre-Potown? I think... pre-Field Blower, and then Potown puts everything in range. That way he has to focus all of his Feather Arrows onto the Espeon EX, make sure he gets a knockout on that Pokemon, when really he wants to deal with something like the Espeon GX, which could be a follow-up attacker. If he commits any more energy to the Tapu Lele that he has on his own bench, that just feeds into the Psychic attack from Xander's Espeon GX, so he's really been put in an awkward spot, and not least he has to move this little Rowlet out of the active position. He's going for some evolutions though, so sparks are about to fly.
Wow. So unless he gets rid of this Espeon EX now, this could be quite detrimental. So I'm assuming there is something going on here. He must have an out at this point. Maybe like a Field Blower, for example, as you say, that would remove that Float Stone, get some Feather Arrows on the board, and then go down the whole Tapu Lele, for example, try and get some damage onto the Espeon that way. Maybe try and go for the knockout. But that Rescue Stretcher is certainly proving useful, and the Special Charge as well. But, I mean, if he's looking for a card in particular in his deck, that is putting more resources back into his deck, which means that he is less likely to hit the resources that he needs. Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. He's just put 4 cards into his deck that aren't the card that he wants to specifically look for, so not great for him. But that being said, he only plays a 2-2 line of Zoroark GX. They've both been knocked out, so he had to recycle them at some point.
Sure.
We're going to see the attachment to the little Rowlet, so he can retreat that. And we're going to see a big Professor Sycamore here. Can he finally find himself
he's got it first card.
A Field Blower? There it is.
He's got it first card.
He's got max potions as well. This is really huge.
Okay, so this could be a game changer to say the least. Tapu Lele is probably your obvious attacker at this point. He's obviously calculated sub numbers because he's chosen not to put the Tapu Lele on the bench with the Choice Band, given that he obviously, before he had the Double Colorless Energy in hand, and he chose to attach it to this Tapu Lele, which is undamaged. But yeah, as you say, the Max Potion will certainly, freshen up one of these Decidueyes, and yeah, he could start, Feather Arrowing very, very soon.
I think he's 10 damage off KOing the Espeon EX, with the Energy Drive dealing 60 and 2 more Feather Arrows from those Decidueyes. The Espeon EX would have 10 HP remaining, so he's debating whether he even goes for the Field Blower now. It's one more item that he always has to be concerned about. but he may not have another chance. He may just simply be victim to an N again. I imagine he'll go for a Field Blower, also max potioning one of his Decidueyes, leaving the Espeon with just 10 HP remaining and hoping that he can also get rid of the ability lock when Xander re-establishes it next turn. But it could be awkward. He may start feather arrowing other options just to make sure he can see himself throughout the game, assuming that he will lose his abilities once again.
Absolutely, and let's not forget that when he does knock out the Espeon EX, he's got 4 prize cards remaining. He knocks out the Espeon EX, he then has 2 prize cards remaining, and that Espeon GX is sitting on the bench. So yeah, I think that was kind of the obvious play at this point. That Espeon GX is sitting on the bench with 150 damage, I believe, so it has 50 short of being knocked out. That in itself is 4 prize cards, and that could potentially win him the game. So that's something on Xander's side that he certainly has to be cautious about. I'm not sure if he plays any cards like Acerola in the deck or anything like that to kind of get that damage off the boards. But as you say, I think it looks to be, well, he's got access to Feather Arrow now, so he's choosing where he wants to put it. Oh, okay. So
it's going to be at least 1 Feather Arrow to the Espeon. It's going to be both Feather Arrows, it looks like, putting it 10 HP away from being knocked out, and also dealing an extra 60 to the Espeon EX. You can see what he's setting up for here. He's thinking, maybe I can Guzma up this Espeon if Xander's most likely going to retreat, and then maybe I can Feather Arrow to finish off the GX on the bench. But for Xander here, it's going to be about hoping to N Daniel's large hand size.
He has to N, I think.
Yeah, as well as re-establishing a tool. These are his 2 priorities. If he's using N and doesn't currently have a tool in hand, it's only 3 cards, so he may be forced into a Professor Sycamore play just so that he can guarantee a tool here.
Absolutely.
So it's a real tug-of-war still for him. He may have to allow Daniel to keep this large hand size because it's just too unrealistic to go for both an N and also the tool. But it looks like he's got himself, well, he's discarding a choice band, so he has access to at least 1 tool. You'd imagine it would have gone on to the Garbodor if that was his only one. So it looks like he's thinning his hand as much as possible. So he feels fairly content here, it looks like.
I think it looks like he's going for the Professor Sycamore because he's taken that Garbodor out of the deck just to obviously use a Professor Sycamore and try and deck thin in the process.
Okay, he has Float Stone.
So he has a Float Stone. So the lock is re-established. The item lock is re-put on back to the Garbodor, which means Garbotoxin comes into play and Feather Arrow is no longer able to activate.
And guess what? There's 11 items in the discard pile.
Wow.
You know what's coming.
Wow.
It's a big old trash avalanche. Going to be able to knock out this Tapu Lele. And now Daniel's still in a really awkward spot. He needs to have Guzma, he needs to have Field Blower, and he needs to have a response attacker to deal with the Espeon EX and GX both this turn. Nothing on his board can take a hit from the Trash Launch Garbodor, so he's in a real spot here. Well, actually, this one Decidueye GX currently can take a hit, seeing so there's just 11 items in the discard pile. He's double checking, making sure those dice are right because you have to do it. 11 means that it requires a choice band in order to get the 1 hit on the Decidueye. He's picked up an Ultra Ball, which isn't actually that great because he still has no abilities available to him. So it's a pretty awkward turn of ducking and weaving really for this 1 turn. And we'll see if he's going to do it. He has his own N, and that's what he's going to hope for here. Potentially attaching a double Colourless Energy to the active or one of his bench potential attackers. If he does it to the bench, it means that he could top deck, or from the end, he could get Guzma as an out for the following turn. If he attaches it active, he simply can only get a double Colourless Energy to then reattach to the Tapu Lele, I imagine. So I think he'll attach to the bench. But at the same time, he can retreat around other Pokemon potentially, so it's still a delicate decision. He does opt to attach to the bench and simply go for that N. He's got to make sure that Xander cannot go for a Guzma play here or find himself a choice band.
Absolutely, and if he does, obviously that is game. I think at this point, as you say, that Decidueye can take a hit. Going down to 1 prize card, you would assume that you are pretty unlikely to draw a choice band from that. Obviously, if you do draw a choice band, I think that would be game there and then. So it's a smart play from Daniel's side. He is going for 4 cards in exchange to Xander's 1. So let's see what he's kind of conserved his hand a little bit. So we can't really see. I saw a double Colourless Energy in there. Is that a Zorua as well as I think?
Yeah, I think it's a Zorua. So he'll put that down onto the bench and simply pass it over. He doesn't have a Field Blower, so he can't go for any Feather Arrows this turn.
Xander has.
This could be game if Xander has it. He's going to have a Scout.
Don't think he has it because he would have just put it down immediately.
Yeah, he has plenty of ways to get game here. An Energy on the Espeon EX or GX can get him game in combination with a Guzma play, something like that, or a means of retreating this Trash Launch. Even a Choice Band could get him game, so he's just making sure he can put himself in as many winning positions as possible if he can't do it on this turn, which it looks like he doesn't. Most of these players, if they see game, they will just simply
announce it.
So we are going to see the big old Trash Launch for 220 damage.
Right, and now Daniel's got problems at this point because he's looking at his hand and he needs to get that Decidueye out of the active spot. And there's nothing that I can see on his bench that he can bring up that's going to save him the game.
No.
How can he... I mean,
it's game. It is game 1 to Xander, and that was a huge comeback. Because remember, Daniel's board state was impeccable. He had 3 Decidueye GX on the board, he had 2 Zoroark GX on the board, and Xander just had 1 energy on an Espeon GX at one point. But then a Guzma play and opting to go for the GX attack with the Espeon, that was the turning point. He spotted the fact that these are the main attackers for Daniel. They only have 60 HP on their lower forms. I can go for this Devolve approach. Xander plays not only Espeon EX, he's also playing the new Shining Jirachi from Shining Legends. So he's always got an eye out for these Devolve plays. He has the Potown, which is very synergistic. So even though he may not have played this matchup many times because he's up against a fairly new archetype, he knows exactly what to do in these situations.
Absolutely, and as we saw actually in that match, you say he used the GX attack. That was a turning point. When he got that Espeon EX into the active spot and then used the Miraculous Shine attack, that was a turning point because that just took so much off Daniel's board. I mean, those Zoroarks immediately went, which meant that he didn't have the trade ability to then re-establish anything because obviously that was his draw engine in the deck. There's just some of the Decidueyes got knocked out, and then not long after that, he then got the tool on Garbodor, which shut off all the abilities. And as you said, that Potown did put in a lot of work as well because that did rack up some numbers. And I mean, what's kind of tricky about this situation is like, I won't use Potown, I'll use Evo Soda, but hey, that's one more item card in the discard pile, which means I can use Trash Launch, which will deal more damage. So again, it's a double-edged sword. It's quite tricky to know, what the best route is in this sense. But I mean, there's still one more game to play, and Daniel can certainly pull it back, especially if he has a start like he did in the first game.
Yeah, and we know the pace of play he has, so he'll be able to squeeze in one more game, and that was his pace of play in the first game. Imagine what it could be in game 2 when he's chasing the lead. So we're going to see both players cutting here. Daniel will be able to go first, of course. That is the rules. When you lose your first game in a best of 3, the loser has the option to go either first or second, and currently, as the rules are, pretty much there's no downside to going first.
Absolutely.
So, especially when you're playing an evolution deck, Daniel's definitely going to kick off here, looking to find as good of a setup as he had last time, but finding a new way to win the game. Now he knows that Xander has these sorts of tricks up his sleeve. One of the big things that he did have going badly for him was that he prized one of his field blowers.
Right.
And as we said, we saw how important Trash Launch Garbodor having the tool, the Garbotoxin Garbodor having the tool on itself, as well as the Potown both are. And
you can see Daniel checking his watch. It's like he knows what the time is.
Yeah.
He specifically wore a watch to this tournament just because he knew he was playing Decidueye. So very smart, as I say, being aware, conscious of the time, because when you are playing these Stage 2 decks, you are conscious about how much time you do have, because, at this moment in time, it is difficult to see how Daniel can take a best 2 out of 3 series, knowing that there is, we know there is, less than 25 minutes on the clock, but he'll know there's about sort of 20, 30 minutes left. Is that enough to take 2 games? I don't believe it is. It might be borderline, but on the other side, Xander is, can certainly, at this point, wrap up the series. I think Daniel at this point is going for a tie at the best. I can't see... I hope I'm wrong for the purpose of, but it's very difficult for me to see if he can get a 2-1 victory out of this match.
Well, he's going to try his best. We do see Xander has himself an Ultra Ball, so it's likely that he'll try and once again mirror Daniel's turn 1. Bridget is such a phenomenal supporter in combination with Tapu Lele GX. It previously wasn't really seen, and when Bridget was first printed, we only had EX Pokemon, but now that there's the introduction of GX Pokemon that gets around the sort of downside of Bridget, it just really lets you settle your board so well.
It's so good.
It allows you to get all these basic Pokemon, Trubbish, of course, as well as Eevee. These are big cards in Xander's deck, as we saw in the last game. And he's going to have a scout through. He hasn't prized anything too severe. One of his 2 Garbotoxins are in the prize cards, but most notably not the Espeon EX, not the Espeon GX. So he's pretty good to go in terms of his strategy that we saw last game being repeated here.
Absolutely. And I love that Daniel started with Tapu Lele GX, but just played Bridget anyway. Just like he just drew it in his opening hand. So, which was fantastic. But as you say, yes, we, at this point in time, first deck checks usually take a little longer than normal, just because they're trying to suss out what is prize. They're trying to work out, what resources do I have to work with. Usually if there's something very important in your deck, like, for example, Tapu Lele GX, usually you work out kind of, how many Tapu Lele GXs do I have in my deck? So if I want to use Ultra Ball when I'm stuck kind of later game to get something out, I can. Interestingly, he attaches a Floatstone to his... I mean, if he's going to Sycamore anyway, I guess it kind of makes sense. But you do want to be saving those Floatstones for your Garbodor, for the Garbotoxin, to activate the Garbotoxin ability. Otherwise, you're stuck... putting choice bands on there, and that's not something you want to do.
Well, as we saw by the prize cam, Xander only plays 1 Bridget, and it wasn't the prize card, so he just sort of had to think, otherwise I'd go for a Wonder Tag here, and I would try and go for the Bridget, but it being prize, he says, I'll just grab myself a Dramper and go for a Big Wheel to finish off this turn. One of the best utility attacks that we have in the game from this Dramper. You need so little to get going, and whenever you have a hand that isn't cooperating, you can just say, you know what, I'm going to spin the wheel and get a fresh 10.
Sure, and as I was saying earlier with Nick, there is no downside to obviously your opponent can end you and put you from 10 to 6, but then you still replenished your hand in some form or another, given that it's less cards. So it's a win-win in most cases. I take back what I said about the Floatstone, because I can actually see in Xander's list, he runs 4 Floatstone. 4 Floatstone. So we can afford to put 1 down on the Tapu Lele, which is absolutely fine. Daniel's just going through his deck now, trying to... Potown's come into play, so that's something that he's going to have to be cautious about. Again, racking up that damage, because you saw how powerful that Espeon EX was in Game 1. So certainly something that's going to be on his mind. Going through the deck, so Zoroark, you would have to say, is the optimal play at this point, just because you want to utilize that trade ability to start drawing more cards in your deck. But as you can see, when he does evolve into Zoroark, those 3 damage counters go onto the Zoroark and N. And
yeah, it's as if he was going to debate that. He was like, "Are you sure? I've only got 10 cards in hand. Are you sure you want to use the N this turn?" But naturally, of course, when you have it, it's a big sigh of relief, because giving your opponent, as we said, hand advantage is just so ridiculous in the trading card game. So Daniel, he's established his Zoroark. Unfortunately, he had the Potown affecting him, so the Dramper is able to be in range with the Berserk, as long as Xander can somehow get damage on his own side of the field. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any Pokemon that he can evolve next turn, and he doesn't play Rainbow Energy in his deck either, so the Dramper may be stuck. If Daniel does opt to start going aggressively with the Zoroark, he could somehow go for a 2-hit KO. He's picked up a Floatstone from this N, which is a big deal, but currently no double colourless. And
so Xander, sorry, beg your pardon.
Yeah, sorry.
Xander has got a Trubbish and a Floatstone in hand with an Ultra Ball, so that's a very good early game setup to go into Garbotoxin, the Garbodor with the Garbotoxin ability. But as you were saying, on the right side, I didn't see what Daniel had in his hand.
It's a big miss from him. He hasn't found himself any energy, so it's a big whiff. He's going to now go for the Field Blower. He's going to evolve into Dartrix afterwards, so that's good sequencing.
Yes.
But he simply has to pass it over to Xander. So the aggression that Daniel could have had, even using N and then a trade afterwards, unable to find a double colourless. He only plays 4 copies, of course, and only 2 copies of Grass Energy, but not able to find it here.
And it's... I mean, at that point, I guess you kind of have to Field Blower, just because you don't want to rack up that damage onto your Dartrix or your Rowlets, because you know that Espeon EX is going to come out later game. It's not prized looking from the prize cam. It's not prized, so we know it's in deck. But yeah, Trubbish comes out. I think that's the safest play at this point, is trying to get a Trubbish out of some sort. And the next thing after that would be something like an Eevee to, as I say, get that... he has already a... Oh, he's going for Dramper. Okay.
Yeah.
He has already, let's not forget, used his GX attack, so we can't, like the last game, use Divide again to spread that damage. So, yeah, I mean, that's certainly going to be a factor. So, yeah, N for 6 cards. Let's see what he kind of draws from here. I guess, you want to be getting that Potown back into play, because it forces a Field Blower, because that Field Blower serves 2 purposes. That not only removes the tools, but it gets rid of the stadium as well. And, if you can force out a field blower to get rid of a stadium, which means that's one field blower less to get rid of some tools, given that you play 4 in this case, well, now I think 2 remaining after that, that's pretty huge. So, and as you can see, he does have the Potown in hand. So...
Yeah, absolutely right. We see Xander, he attaches to the bench here saying, you know what, why do a 2-hit KO with a Berserk when I can set up another attacker and get damage on myself and do 1-hit KOs later on? So you can see experience with the deck. He wants to make sure he has attackers throughout the game, not putting all his eggs in one basket. So he's going to spread his attacks, and getting this little 20 poke actually isn't insignificant, because now he won't need a choice band to 1-hit KO the Tapu Lele later on in the game. So passes back over to Daniel. He's going to take 3 damage counters as he evolves up into his Decidueye, and he does have himself a double Colorless Energy. Now, if he could trade into something like a Guzma, he could deal with the Trubbish, and it could be a phenomenal play. He does have the Espeon EX. Maybe that's going to be something he gets rid of with a trade. It depends how aggressively he wants to go here. There we go. We are going to see the double Colorless Energy attached to the Zoroark. He's going for N rather than any other play. He could have dug a little bit harder to try and find Guzma, which could have been very handy. I think he also had a Floatstone in his hand, which he opted not to play. So potentially he's happy just chilling on the bench and trying to develop his board as much as possible.
Okay, which is very interesting because, I don't know. If you have the option to attack with Zoroark, I guess that would have, try and get some damage on the board. Does that hit any numbers at the moment? So I don't think Drampa has a knockout on that Zoroark. You might need a choice band, which would do 180. 180 is 30. That might do it, so maybe that's what he's kind of thinking. Yeah,
maybe he's just concerned. The fact that Xander did choose to attach energy across his board, it just makes him way safer against an aggressive Zoroark GX play. And maybe Daniel wants to protect the Zoroark for as long as possible, because as we saw, as soon as his draw engine went away, pretty much his deck started to crumble a little bit. So he's actually drawn back into that Floatstone, so he has the option all over again. This time he attaches it, sure.
Why not? Okay, well, never mind. He's going straight for...
so he still has a trade available, I think. But he opts not to do it. And
is there anything in his hand that he wants to get rid of significantly?
I mean, see the Feather Arrow.
There's not too much I can see in there. So he's going for Righteous Beating.
So 10 damage short, thanks to that one Feather Arrow that he was able to establish. He's hoping that he can clear that up with a Decidueye later on in the game, which is actually pretty decent for him. Forces Xander to commit energy onto something that's heavily damaged if he wants to do any meaningful output. And at the same time, of course, it means that Xander still has to dig to try and find activation for more damage from the Potown for his own benched Pokemon. If Daniel were to spread damage on Xander's bench, it just does the job for him. So Xander having to spend a second double Colorless Energy is so painful here. He's going to Lily into 2 cards, not fantastic. And look at this, the only Pokemon he can evolve into isn't the right Garbodor.
Wow. Wait, does he have... I'm sure he can't have had an Ultra Ball in hand. I thought I saw an Ultra Ball, but he can't have, because...
I think it was just a rescue stretcher.
Right, okay, because that doesn't make sense. But, I mean, at the same time, he's committed another double Colorless Energy, which isn't ideal. It's far from ideal, actually. But at least he got the knockout on the Zoroark, which is, partially the engine of the deck in terms of, using those trade abilities. Although he does have a Zoroark on the bench, which means that he's going to most likely... he's got a rescue stretcher in hand, actually. If he wants to, he can just bring back up the Zoroark, bench it down. He would be taking the 3 damage, although he does have the Field Blower in hand to get rid of both the Stadium and the Floatstone.
This is going to be a ridiculous turn, I think. I think Daniel has so much going on for him. He has a Field Blower if he wishes to use it. He has Ultra Ball. He has the Rescue Stretcher, as you said, to recover things. He can also N Xander as well. So Nning Xander to a low hand size. He can then Feather Arrow afterwards, and then Daniel's drawing 8 cards effectively. So if he gets the sequencing correct, he could have a really bonkers turn here. He's going to attach a Grass Energy to his Decidueye, so potentially he's content to go for a GX attack again this turn. We saw him use it almost as a filler attack during your game to recover some important cards, and we do know that there are a couple of Field Blower in his discard pile. These are some of the most crucial cards in the matchup, so he's identifying, it may be difficult for me to dig and find myself a double Colorless Energy this turn. I have a Grass, why don't I just go for the Hollow Hunt while I'm pretty safe to do so, and he can make sure it's difficult for Xander to keep playing because he's going to end him to a low hand size.
Absolutely, and you saw how powerful in the end, but by the end of that match, how powerful that Garbodor was with the Trash Lance attack, which effectively won him the game because he managed to 2-shot that Decidueye. So that's serving 2 purposes in the sense it's bringing back item cards from the discard pile, going into your hand, which means it's dealing less damage with Trash Lance. But obviously, the other factor is that you want to be getting back crucial resources because, as I say, the field blowers at this point are just so crucial. But if I'm Daniel, I'm certainly seeing an opening at this point.
That's a trade. He just hands it over to Xander there.
Right.
He picks up a couple of awkward cards, actually. He's going to evolve into the Dartrix. He also has an Ultra Ball. He may want to re-establish the Zorua that he recovered with the Rescue Stretcher, I think. But we are just going to see now he's going to take a couple prizes with his one Feather Arrow. Don't think he drew into anything else, so he's just going to freely retreat. And first of all, he has to wait for Xander to choose his own Pokemon in order to continue with his turn. And then we'll end on what is likely going to be a Hollow Hunt GX attack. Still very powerful in the trading card game, and I'm just so glad to see this archetype working. It's one that I've been testing myself and not knowing if some of the top players would be bringing it, or if they've had enough time to test the archetype. Decidueye oftentimes touted as one of the better decks when we did have Forest of Giant Plants around, but
Absolutely.
Daniel's found a way to make it work even without that anymore. So really cool stuff to see the archetype working as well as it is. And we are going to see Daniel eyeing up what he wants to use with the Hollow Hunt GX. The double colourless most likely going to be one of those targets. Also the field blowers, as we've mentioned, are super important depending on what supporters Daniel has in his hand. I think his hand is really large and he only has Professor Sycamore available to him, so potentially even another supporter card he may look to grab here.
If he had a double colours energy and one more bench Pokemon, that would be enough to take the knockout on Garbodor, which interestingly would take all the damage off Xander's board, which would mean the Dramper on the following turn wouldn't be able to use that Berserk attack to its maximum potential. I don't believe he has that, otherwise he probably would have spotted that.
Well, he attached the grass this turn, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah. So, so he's bringing back, he's using Hollow Hunt, bringing back that, the Guzma, double colourless, and what else is he looking for? He must be thinking Field Blower at this point because it is at the top of the discard pile.
You can see he's eyeing up the Field Blower. He's also thinking Rescue Stretcher could be good because gaining more Zoroarks is also really great because you just have hand advantage and there's no sign of a Trashalanche Garbodor for maybe the next 2 turns. So he's thinking maybe I can cash in on those enough to where I don't even need my abilities later on in the game. So it goes over to Xander now. He has a real task ahead of him. He does have a Tapu Lele GX, so that is something. He has one Trashalanche Garbodor in his hand. That was one of the ones he took from his prize card, so he may still be able to Sycamore this away. We are going to see the Wonder Tag here. He's going to look through his deck and see how he can get back into this game.
It's quite tricky especially if you're Daniel, you must be feeling pretty good about this matchup. But as you say, there is no Garbodor coming into play post this Trashalanche Garbodor, so we don't see anything like Garbotoxin coming into effect, which means he has access to all of his abilities. So Daniel is certainly looking good at this moment in time. So he's going for Guzma. What would you suspect his target is, unless it's like, I don't know, Dartrix, or can he one-shot the... Oh, he has the damage on the Garbodor. So if he gets a double colours energy onto the Dramper, switches that out, and then he might have knockout.
Yeah, he has double colourless in his hand here.
And as you said, that poke from earlier, which was 20 damage, is quite crucial on that Tapu Lele because now that he has one shot to that, I think at this point, sometimes you win games not being in command of the situation, but you just win games by taking prizes. So, as obvious as that sounds, if Xander can knock out this Tapu Lele, and then follow it up with next turn with knocking out something like another GX or another EX Pokemon, he might not have the best board situation, but he would have taken 4 prizes with 2 attacks, which would mean that would win in the game or the match in this case in the series.
I really like this play from Xander. He's opting to deal with the Tapu Lele that he's already prior damaged so that he can, in fact, attach the Choice Band to his benched Trashalanche Garbodor. So it really does force Daniel into an awkward spot. He's saying, you know what, that Trashalanche is getting big again. I have a Choice Band, so maybe that could finish off the game. So Daniel in a really awkward spot where even if he does deal with the Dramper this turn, which he has to do, he also needs to be concerned about that Trashalanche. So he has to not only deal with the Dramper, he has to do it with not many items.
Absolutely, and I think that red dice at the top, is representing the count of item cards in the discard pile. I'm pretty sure. In which case that is 60. So I mean that is slowly racking up. Obviously, the more item cards that Daniel uses, the more that Garbodor becomes a threat. It does have a Choice Band on it as well, which means it's going to be hitting more damage. But if you look into Xander's hand, I'm pretty sure that's his hand that he's holding at the moment.
No, that's the discard pile.
Oh, is it? Okay, fair enough.
Thank goodness.
I was going to say there's a lot of cards in there. So wait, so what's the Tapu Lele? Is that also the discard pile as well? On the right hand side?
No, the Tapu Lele is just on his board.
Okay. No.
So the Guzma's the top card in his discard pile. So it's Daniel's turn right now. So he's got the double colourless. He can start using Riotous Beating if he really wants to. We are going to first see the Rescue
So
Stretcher.
the Tapu Lele was in the discard pile as well. That's
for
sure.
Daniel's side?
Yes,
that's right.
Sure. So yes. Interestingly, he turns his discard pile sideways, which is... I haven't seen that too much played by too many players. But, so he's going for Wonder Tag. And, there you see David is straight on. I believe it's David that's judging this game. Yeah, he's straight on that, turning that the right way up. So he's gone for the Wonder Tag. Is that an N?
He's picking up the N, trying to make it as difficult as possible for Xander to take the game here. He's got too many cards to simply go for Professor Sycamore, and he needs to keep digging for cards. So if he uses Sycamore, it would just mean that the Trash Launch would just be way too large. So his hand size was so intimidating that he couldn't actually use the supporter that he wanted to go for.
Right.
Instead, he's going to go for the N, trying to limit Xander's outs. He needs to find himself things like Field Blower, also Psychic Energy, of course, to actually use the Trash Launch attack in the first instance. So it's going to be interesting here. Daniel dealing a lot of damage so far with this Riotous Beating, so he may be able to respond on the Dramper. It's just whether Xander's able to pull anything out off of this 2-card N.
Absolutely, and I do believe that, I think that Xander does have the trade ability to use this turn. I don't think that he's used it already, so, I mean, that's another potential 2 cards that he can dig further into his deck, if it is the case that he hasn't used it. He's working out the damage here. I don't think he will have a knockout. He's just trying to apply pressure.
Those are the feather arrows, not the
not
the attack. Thank goodness.
For 40 damage. Okay. Feather arrow. Can he get? Well, he's got Ultra Ball in hand. So
I think he's he's one bench Pokemon away from the Riotous Beating knockout.
So
but the awkward thing here is the Ultra Ball can only get rid of item cards. So he's really worried about a responding Trasher Launch. So he may be more content to not play the item cards and not take the knockout this turn, and that's exactly what he's going for. It looks like. Oh, he's debating it.
Oh, is he going to? No, he's... Okay.
He was just eyeing up the Evo Soda, and simply he has no Pokemon that are eligible to receive Evo Soda, so he can't play that card out of his hand. He's just hoping that these Feather Arrows the next turn, and with a combination of trade, he can maybe Guzma his way into the game, but this is coming down to the wire. Let's see what Xander has taken from his 2 cards.
Xander's drawn pretty godly. He's got a Sycamore in there. So, so trying to end your opponent down to 2 cards. He's drawn 1 for his turn. He has got the Sycamore in hand, which he is without a doubt going to play. He did have Guzma in there, which I'm not sure if that's doing anything at this moment in time. I don't believe it is doing anything. So he's got the Psychic Energy in there, which is undoubtedly going to go down on that. Oh, he has Eevee as well, which can go into Espeon.
That might be his best bet here. He may have to try and deny Daniel 1 more turn of attacking in order to stop him taking a 4-prize turn in combination with some Feather Arrows.
Does Daniel have anything in hand like Guzma? Like, could he get out of a confusion at this moment in time?
I think not currently, but he'll have trade available and an extra draw, so he'll have like 3 draws to maybe try and find it. So instead, Xander's going to try and establish one last Trubbish and see if he can eventually get the ability lock on board. This Drampa GX is effectively knocked out just because it was 1 Feather Arrow away, so it doesn't make sense to try and like retreat it or preserve it. So he may as well just get damage in with the Drampa. Looks like he is debating this Float Stone. He's going to put it on. Of course, he's also worried about N from Daniel's side, because that could also put him back out of range of some sorts of knockout. So we are just going to see the Berserk here.
He has Ultra Ball in hand, which means he can establish that Garbotoxin for next turn if he wants to.
Here we go. Daniel's playing pretty quickly. He's got himself Guzma. This looks like game 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 150. So he can do 1 Feather Arrow to the active. He can Guzma and then do 1 more Feather Arrow onto a bench Tapu Lele and take the knockout. So I think that is a 4-prize turn from Daniel. Incredible stuff there. So yeah, there's the 1 Feather Arrow, then he Feather Arrows again, and there it is. Very good stuff from Daniel, very simple, and wow, that was a huge comeback, and it was bizarre really. I think Daniel had the better setup in the first game, and yet in the second game, that's the one he won.
Right, which absolutely is exactly what you're saying. He did have a good setup, although in the second game, Xander didn't establish the Garbodor with the Garbotox ability, which meant that he had access all game to using those abilities. Now the issue they have is that, we are into game 3. There is like less than 5 minutes on the clock, which will most likely be that this game will be called a tie, unless, of course, there is a case that one of them draws badly, and then most likely you'd have to think that Xander would be the likelier of the two at this point to win the game. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic achievement for both players to have come back like they did. It was really good, great to observe, especially decks like Decidueye where you think they're down and out and they kind of make a comeback. So very, fantastic on both players.
Yeah,
sides.
I think the outcome of that game actually goes back to Xander's very first turn where he realised he prized Bridget and then couldn't be able to get Troubushes on board, because we know that's so important, because Xander also had things like Floatstone. He could have gone for a turn 2 Garbatoxin. Everything could have been different if that wasn't prized, and that's one of the big issues with Bridget. It's amazing, but it's only amazing on the first turn, so people only play one copy sometimes, and then it can be so awkward when you prize it. So only a few more minutes in this third game. It's likely going to be a tie unless we see some shenanigans where someone doesn't have a very playable opening hand. It looks like Daniel has himself a Tapu Koko, which is not a bad lead for him. It has free retreat and it has a decent amount of HP. Xander, however, is going to be kicking us off in this third game, and he's got himself an opening Ultra Ball, so he's going to be in the game. You can see there his one-of tech, the Shining Jirachi, a new card from Shining Legends, which is in a similar vein used to try and devolve Pokemon, but it only targets the active Pokemon, and it devolves all stages rather than just the top evolution like the Espeon EX.
And I love that even, Daniel's play has been so consistent over the speed of which he's been playing. Has been so consistent. It doesn't matter if you just started the game or if you're getting to the later stages of the game. He's consistently played at a very high tempo, which is great to see. It's but as you can see, Xander's going through his deck. He has used Ultra Ball. He's gone for that Tapu Lele. He's looking for that Bridget again, that turn 1 Bridget, which he does have this time. Picking out 3 Pokemon. He's gone for Drampa GX and 2 Trubbish. So he's trying to... you would have to think, especially going first. I can't remember who went first on game 1, but obviously Daniel went first on game 2. So going first for Xander is pretty... It's a big deal, because you can go into, get into Floatstone Garbodor into, by your second turn. So, it is quite significant in this sense. But yeah, I just don't see a way that this game will conclude itself in a space of 1 minute and 15 seconds or so. But
yeah, the players don't know the exact time, although Daniel is wearing a watch and he's keeping a keen eye. They've just got to play as quickly as possible. Daniel always has throughout every turn. Both players have Bridget, so it seems like it's pretty much going to be a tie. But both players still have to play out as much as they can do. Daniel, of course, being an evolution deck, this is ideal for him. He's got himself double Rowlet and also a Zorua that he can plonk straight onto the bench. And from there, it may just be passing it back over. Yeah, and indeed, Xander is going to take his turn. Daniel still shuffling, but he's saying, Xander, you got to play, man. We got to keep going. We want to conclude this game. Absolutely.
And it's, as I say, especially with those Bridgets as well, having so many Pokemon on the bench, I don't think it's possible to take, 6 prizes in the space of this short amount of time they have. But nonetheless, it's still great that they're playing it out. They've acknowledged that, and Xander, you'd think if you've just tuned into watching the stream now, you'd think that Xander was playing very fast because of the amount of time that he has, which is completely not the case. He's been playing like this the whole entire match, which is...
So Xander flipped his GX attack to go for the big wheel, and Daniel just continued to play his turn so quickly that he then ended Xander, so he never even got to see the juicy 10 cards.
Sure.
So that's a bit disheartening for him, but Daniel trying to play as quickly as possible and make sure this game can conclude. We are going to see the Enter 6. He does get himself some double colourless energy, but no Zoroark GX, so potentially just a flying flip this turn. Maybe even an energy drive for the Tapu Lele that he drew to get 80 damage onto the Drampa. That looks like what he could be going for here. He could also weave in a Wonder Tag before any Garbatoxin comes into play. Looks like he's just content to put it on the bench. He has a Professor Sycamore in his hand, so he could start going aggressively, but instead he's just going to keep it in the back just in case he needs it and leave this Tapu Koko up as potential fodder here.
Sure, and as you can see just from the judge there, he has put down the dice there, which has the 1 on it, which tells us that it's gone into turn, which means that both players will have at least one more turn to conclude the game, in which case we don't suspect that there will be a winner, but they still have to play out their turns anyway. So we've got turn 0, 1, which is now on Xander's turn, will be Daniel for turn 2, and then turn 3 for Xander, and the game will be concluded as most likely what we think will be a tie.
Yeah, by the looks of things, it will be a tie. When there is Decidueye GX in the equation, they can get a wild amount of prizes in single turns. As we saw in Game 2, he took a 4-prize turn because he was able to access the bench whilst also attacking in the active position. So Xander doing his due diligence. He's saying, you know what, I need to establish this Garbotoxin and not allow Daniel to somehow get a crazy few prizes over the next few turns. But it looks to be the case that it's pretty much part and parcel that these players will end up tying. We see an attachment to the Drampa GX, but he could go for a Berserk this turn, seeing as though he has evolved up into the Garbodor in order to take a knockout, and Xander's going to do exactly that. And we're going to see the Tapu Lele instantly promoted by Daniel. He's going to play a Max Potion, double colours again to Tapu Lele. He's going in, and here comes a big Professor Sycamore.
So yeah, and as I say, there's he still needs a Field Blower anyway to do anything. He can't use Trade, he can't use Feather Arrow because Garbodor's ability is in place, which is preventing Daniel from using abilities. But that will be his final turn, and now it's up to Xander to finish his turn, which again, there doesn't really look like much can be done at this point. I mean, it's not done on like a prize basis. For example, like if you've taken more prizes, then therefore you win the game. The game is seen as inconclusive, so therefore will be concluded as a tie. But nonetheless, Xander's still playing his turn out and seeing how...
It's just saying, yep, I got the choice band, I'd take knockouts, I guess. But there's no shame